Scott Smith. I'm the managing editor of the Old Colony Memorial in Wicked Local Plymouth. I want to thank all of our candidates for coming to this Candidates Forum, which is a new and exciting collaboration with the Old Colony Memorial, Wicked Local Plymouth, and PACTV, the local provider of our government access channel. I will be acting as the moderator for this forum. Let me explain the format. Tonight, 2 of the 3 candidates for school committee will be participating in the forum. Unfortunately, Mr. Sorensen couldn't make it tonight. The candidates will be introduced in alphabetical order. They will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and speak about who they are and why they're running for this elected office, as well as describing their qualifications for the position. The candidates will then be asked a total of 7 questions. Each person gets the same question. They will have 2 minutes to answer each question. The moderator reserves the right to ask a follow-up question, and should I ask a follow-up, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. This will not be a debate. It's a chance for the candidates to let voters know who they are, where they stand on certain issues. So we're ready to begin? For our school committee candidates, we have Mr. Jay Ferguson and Mrs. Lee Trishelli. Thank you both for coming. Mr. Ferguson will introduce himself first, and then Mrs. Trishelli. We will then rotate the order of who answers questions. Mr. Ferguson, you have 2 minutes for your introduction. Please note that we are keeping time, and we will ask our candidates to stop speaking if they go over their allotted time. Jay, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you to PACTV for having me here this evening. My name is Jay Ferguson. I grew up in the Manomet section of Plymouth. I was elected as a homeroom representative in high school with a fellow by the name of Mark Fonashari. He's a principal here in school. I attended the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, where I participated in student government there. I was also a cadet officer there. After graduating, I started a career going to sea, where I've worked on tankers and freighters, container ships, and most recently I worked for the Steamship Authority running the ferries to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. I've been active in government for quite some time. In 2001, I was appointed to the Manomet Steering Committee, where I learned that the town had plans to close the Manomet Branch Library. That was something I really couldn't put up with. Manomet's had a branch library for 100 years, and they were going to close it for lack of space in an area of town where we're littered with excess commercial buildings that were sitting waiting to be rehabbed. I put pressure on the town, and we have a permanent home for our library now. I'd like to use that same go-getter attitude to do other things for the school system. Most recently, I put a lot of pressure on the town to clean the sidewalks in Manomet. The sidewalks in Manomet hadn't been cleaned in years. It took the DPW 3 weeks using heavy equipment to clear all the debris from those sidewalks. The sidewalks get swept up on the waterfront every week in season, but yet for some reason, for years, we're just not allowed to have the same benefits down in Manomet that you get when you live uptown proper. My constituents down in Manomet have also told me they don't want to pay for the sewer pipe for downtown. I'm a town meeting representative now. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ferguson, thank you very much. Mrs. Trishelli, Lee, take it away.
Yes, Lee Trishelli, running for school committee. First of all, thank you, PACTV, for having us here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about my candidacy. I'm the mother of 3 boys, a West Plymouth resident. I'm happy to say my kids will be attending the Plymouth public school system. I'm wife to a combat veteran who still is currently active in the United States Air Force. One of my biggest passions, I would say, is most certainly bringing some awareness to our military families here in our Plymouth school system, whether it's children of deployed parents, children that have matriculated here from another school system, and just having the ability to certainly open some dialogue to bring some awareness for our military families here in Plymouth. I hold a Bachelor of Science from Franklin Pierce College. I also hold a degree from studying art history at Richmond University in London, England. I feel sort of my background in sales and marketing prior to becoming a parent provided me with the skills to think critically and objectively, to hold an open dialogue, and most certainly keep an open mind. It's always been an ambition of mine to run for school board. I think it's a very important seat. And I look forward to learning most certainly about the processes with the school board, how we make integral decisions that directly impact the benefit of our kids, and just being a part of the process. So I look forward to being elected, and I certainly hope for your vote on May 14th. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mrs. Trishelli. And now it's time for the first question. We're going to proceed in alphabetical order. The second candidate now will begin. That will be you, Lee. We'll rotate like this back and forth throughout the forum. Mrs. Trishelli, you will answer first. As I said, you're going to have 2 minutes for your answer. And here's your question. What do you see as the most significant issue facing the school district? And as a school committee member, what would you try to do about it?
I think one of the things that has come up from just speaking with some of our administrators and our superintendent was, the hot topic of unfunded mandates in our educational system. I know now at a state level, it's actually been brought up. There was an amendment filed by one of our legislators to create an 11-member task force to put together basically and review these unfunded mandates to make sure that if the state is mandating that we do certain protocols, that it's absolutely funded. So I'd like to keep an open dialogue with our delegation, with Reps Muratori, with Reps Coulter, with State Senator DiMacedo, make sure that we have a clear open dialogue and that we communicate the need to review these unfunded mandates and make sure that it's fair to open up I guess more communication, but also alleviate some of the compliance issues that our teachers face and give them the ability, less reporting, more teaching.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ferguson, would you like me to repeat the question? Your turn for 2 minutes.
Yes, I would, please.
Okay. What do you see as the most significant issue facing the school district? And as a school committee member, what would you try to do about it?
I have a 10-year-old child, my oldest son. He has what is referred to as an autism spectrum disorder, ASD, or autism. Because of this affliction, I guess we should call it, I've reached out to a lot of people, gotten to know a lot of people that are in similar situations, and the school system isn't particularly nice to them. They'll say they are, and from my own personal experience now, I can say that no, they're not. They're not welcome to criticism whatsoever. Do not make a complaint. A lot of parents I've spoken to say they don't complain because they're afraid of retribution, which I can't even fathom somebody having retribution on a child for something that a parent complained about. I don't understand that, and I have some complaints that I've actually registered with different state and local agencies that I think need to be addressed by the school system. Most recently was a complaint to the Board of Health. I've discovered that none of the children in Indian Brook or Manamet Elementary wash their hands before going to lunch. The kids at the Manamet Elementary School actually go directly from a playground where goose live and defecate all over the place. They're going directly from the playground into lunch without washing their hands. I've spoken with my pediatrician about this. I recently, this week, spoke to somebody from Children's Hospital about this. The healthcare community is just disgusted by this report. And I asked my child before I came to the debate tonight, did you wash your hands before lunch today? And he said, no, Dad, nobody does that at this school. That needs to be addressed.
Well, thank you very much. The next question, Mr. Ferguson, we're going to start with you. With the school district's preschool program moving to PCIS over the summer, Mount Pleasant School will be empty. What should the district do with that building?
Something I haven't considered before, the extra building. Mount Pleasant is just a quintessential New England school building. It's a magnificent building. South Meadow Road's offices out in the middle of nowhere there, almost out to Carver, it's not convenient for somebody that lives in South Plymouth, which seems to be where a lot of the population lives now. Perhaps moving the offices from South Meadow Road up to Mount Pleasant. I know that they've mentioned in the past that they'd like to move into the old town hall when the new town hall is completed. I don't know whether that room would be adequate for them there or not. It's, like I say, I haven't really considered it yet. It's a beautiful piece of property, and whether they open a daycare center there, it's designed for children to use. It should be used.
Well, it's a beautiful old building and a wonderful neighborhood. Mrs. Trishelli, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
I sort of agree with Jay in that aspect. You know, I am a big proponent to utilizing the infrastructure that we have in lieu of building new. It's a beautiful piece of property. I would like to keep it within the schools. If the administrative office would move over there, that would be fantastic to use what we have. Absolutely.
Well, you, excuse me, you're both kind of feeding into the next question we had. I would have asked it as a follow-up if we hadn't, but I'm just going to pose the next question that I had ready. Mrs. Trishelli, this is for you first, because a lot of discussion suggests that when Town Hall does relocate to Court Street, it would be desirable for the school administration to move to Lincoln Street. Is this a good idea? Why or why not? And is converting 11 Lincoln Street to a school administration building worth the expense?
I think we'd have to look at that a little bit more depth, most certainly from an expenditure perspective. What are the costs associated with the relocation? But also, you know, what are the costs if they have to tear that building down for code reasons? So I think I'd like to research that a little bit more to make a really valid opinion on it. But I'll definitely consider, you know, the question and do some research to make my, you know, formal opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, same question. Would you like me to repeat?
Lincoln Street is a working office building now that I believe has a larger staff than South Meadow Road does. They would fit right in there. There should be very little conversion necessary. Back to Mount Pleasant, if I may, down in Manomet we have the Bartlett Hall, the Manomet Youth Center, a building used for an after-school program for young children that is very successful. Perhaps Mount Pleasant could be converted into something like that. I had suggested the same thing be done with the old fire station on South Street years ago to, what was the town manager's name? Ellie Beth? Was that the town manager years ago? I suggested something like that, only in the fire station, have the doors open up and have either pool tables or ping pong tables, something for the kids to do in town other than at the time sit out in front of the old IGA looking like hoodlums. Give them someplace to go. The YMCA wanted me to help them raise money to build a new YMCA. I said, well, we already have a standing building there. Why don't we use the standing buildings we have rather than try to build big fancy new buildings? It seems like that's the biggest expense. So, yeah, they should move from South Meadow Road. They're out in the middle of nowhere.
Gotcha. All right, thank you very much. Mr. Ferguson, we'll start with you on the next question. The district's 2020 strategic plan identifies increased family and community engagement as one of the 4 principal goals for the next 5 years for the district. How important is this to student success, and what can and should local schools do to reach that goal? It's kind of a long question. If like
No.
What
can we do to reach out to bring people together? As I mentioned, I have a child with an autism problem, and he was going to Federal Furnace, and I went to my local elementary school, and I said, look, I've signed a release for all my information to be given out to the classmates at Federal Furnace, but they don't live in the neighborhood. We can't get together for a play date. Can I get the class list from Indian Brook so that maybe I can get something going with my neighborhood kids because the biggest problem with my son is his social skills. So we want to work on the social skills, and yet the headmaster at Indian Brook wouldn't hear any of that whatsoever. I've had a lot of complaints from people that have moved into town recently and enrolled their children in the school system, and they use the same words. They're not friendly. They're not friendly places at all. They don't feel welcome, and a whole bunch of them have either moved or they have a for sale sign in front of their house. It's a revolving door for kids, and we got to make these places a little friendlier. I would suggest something in my profession we call a crew change. That's when the crew of a boat gets off and a new crew comes on. It's time for a crew change in the town of Plymouth.
Okay, thank you. Again, it was a long question, Mrs. Trishelli. Would you like me to repeat it?
Sure. Well, that would be great, yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to. The district's 2020 strategic plan identifies increased family and community engagement as one of the district's 4 principal goals for the next 5 years. How important is this to student success, and what can and should local schools do to reach that goal?
I think it's important. I just received an email today from Plymouth Public Schools about the first annual Family Leadership Conference. It's ironic the question came up, but it was basically how can we engage our families together with the training and assistance to equip our families to support our children's success. I'd like to attend it, and I hope it becomes successful. I think having resources like this to reach out to our parents, is fantastic. We live in a different world now. Our kids have more access to social media and to external influences. I think collaboratively as a school system, we've done, a good job in trying to make sure we provide safe infrastructure, a safe environment for our kids. And, having, the forum to have our parents get together who care, who want to be engaged, and to reach out to our administrators and our educators is very important. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So we went from a long question, we're going to go to a shorter question this time. I like to bounce it around here. So Mrs. Trishelli, you're up again. What grade would you give the district's technology plan, and why?
Well, that's something I'd have to look at again a little bit more. My son is in 2nd grade, so we don't have a lot of technology, I think, in his curriculum right now. I know he does have access to computers in his class, and he's thriving and doing very well, but I'd like to look at it in a little bit more depth before I can give a direct opinion on that or answer to that question. Okay,
and Mr. Ferguson, right to you. Would you like me to repeat that question about the technology program at school?
It was a pretty quick question. The technology plan. I know that recently for park testing, they went out and they bought a whole bunch of pads. My wife and I discovered several years ago when she got herself an iPhone that the Mac products are just so much more superior than the PC-based DOS products. Basically, if you buy a regular computer, you're going to have it for 2-3 years and it's going to stop working. You buy a Mac product, it seems to work doing what it does forever. I was very disheartened when they went with the cheaper product, because I know it's not going to last and it's going to require more service. I met one of the fellas, I hope I don't get him in trouble here, but we were at Rose and Vicky's. He told me he was one of the IT technicians for the school district. And he said, in the business world, you'll have, a 1 to 35 ratio of one IT technician to 35 units to take care of. In the Plymouth Public School System, it's one technician for 375 units. So he feels like he's slightly overworked with all of this IT work he's doing. I believe they've just kind of flooded everywhere. But now you're going to have problems, and in classic Plymouth fashion, it seems like all we ever do is take perfectly good old things and throw them out and replace them again. I wish they had gone with the Mac products. But the technology plan, both my children are technologically hip, and I'm not going to rely on the school to teach them how to be technology hip. My 10-year-old child knows the ground rules about going online and chatting with strangers. We don't give out any personal information.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Ferguson, we're right back to you. We're already at question number 6. We're flying right along here. You mentioned Park earlier. Do you believe in standardized testing? Why? And what is your preference, Park, MCAS, or something entirely different?
Believe it or not, I'm an entirely different kind of guy. No, from what I understand of park testing is so that the government knows more about your child than you do. I took a test when I was getting married. The priest wanted my wife and I to take this test, and we poked holes in a piece of paper independently, and he fed it into a computer, and he came out, and he told us what our relationship was like just by how we answered these arbitrary questions, which is kind of what Park is doing, from what I understand. They want to know who the bad kids are, who the bright kids are, so they can push them along. I'm not a fan of standardized testing. What I am a fan of is kids learning how to grow food. If you've ever met a first-generation immigrant in this country, people right off the boat, because I'm a merchant marine, I've met a lot of people that have immigrated this country and have been drawn to boats. Every one of those people has some sort of little garden in their yard that they use to feed themselves. I think that for the most part, Americans, if they can't drive through their local McDonald's drive-through window, they'd starve. It's part of the dumbing down of America. People don't even know how to grow themselves a good salad. This is less about testing, more about actually being able to do things. I think that's more important for our kids to learn. Apparently there's problems up at Hedges School where children aren't fed enough, and maybe a neighborhood garden up there would help alleviate the problem. So.
All right, well, thank you. I'll repeat the question from Mrs. Trisselli. Do you believe in standardized testing? And if so, why? What is your preference, Park, MCAS, or something different?
Well, it's hard to answer. My son hasn't partaken in any of those testing yet because he's so young. And again, this is just coming from personal experience. I was in 10th grade when they rolled out MCAS, and I remember having to study for it. This was back in 1995 or 1996. You know, I do see where standardized tests, they do have, you know, some benefit in terms of seeing how well our kids are doing. Massachusetts is the hub of education. We have some of the best and brightest students, and I feel our district certainly does put out some of the best and brightest students. I also see the frustrations that parents have with the curriculum, with Common Core, and with the test, the Park test that judges how well our students, you know, do under that curriculum. I don't think young kids in particular need a lot of added pressures on them. Or kids should be having any anxiety when it comes to testing. I do agree with Jay when it comes to gardening. I've been, you know, I'm a daughter of an Arkansas farmer, and I do see the benefits to less testing and more hands-on approach for sure, but finding sort of a means to the end. I know sort of some of the background with Common Core and the Park testing. There's a ballot initiative that they've taken now to revoke it. You know, again, I'm down the middle with it because I do see, you know, some of the frustrations from parents with kids being tested so often and some of the pressures they face. But I also, you know, try to be considerate of, you know, the tax burden. You know, how is this going to come back to, you know, our taxpayers, the cost if we implement a whole new curriculum? So again, I'm sort of down the middle with it. I haven't experienced it firsthand with the testing from a personal experience with my own children. But I do see both sides. Equally, I do see both sides. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And amazingly, we're already at question number 7, and that's the last one that I've come up with. So we're going to stop after this one. But Mrs. Trishelli, you're going to lead off with this one. And here it is. Given the problems this community is experiencing with opioid addiction and the many initiatives in the schools to raise awareness about the dangers of drug abuse, would you support a ballot initiative to legalize marijuana? And please explain your answer.
That's an interesting question. You know, we certainly face a whole new set of problems now raising young children. You know, across the country, there's been success in the legalization in the medical field. I am a proponent in any capacity to help heal. I'm a big proponent of organic and natural. And that being said, there's a lot of loopholes to abuse. So again, you'd have to really focus on making, you know, critical decisions and putting in the research and making sure that you come up with the right criteria when you implement something like legalizing marijuana. But again, I do see some of the benefits from the organics community and from a health perspective, where, you know, marijuana can be beneficial. And I know that personally. I have friends that have a sick son that would benefit from you know, the actual purest form of marijuana. And, you know, I can't say I'm completely against it in that aspect, but I also see that there could be problems with a loophole and people being able to abuse it. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate all your candid answers.
Sure.
Mr. Ferguson, I'll repeat the question for you, and this is going to wrap up our questions. Given the problems this community is experiencing with opioid addiction and the many initiatives in the schools to raise awareness about the dangers of drug abuse, would you support a ballot initiative to legalize marijuana? And please explain your answer.
I do support the legalization of marijuana. Right now, it's illegal and it's everywhere. What I think we really need to do is start raising awareness with young adults about alcohol. The conception that your child isn't going to drink any alcohol until he's 21 is just silly. You can watch the news on any channel on any given day and see some tragedy about a teenager and his alcohol death. The addicts that I know personally told me that the first time they tried heroin was when they were drunk. Drunk people do careless, stupid things. They're drunk. They'll try anything. Hey, watch this. I've also talked to some recovering heroin addicts that said they didn't know anything about heroin until they watched a movie in their DARE class where they were shown exactly how to melt it down, how to prepare the needle, and how to inject it. You taught them everything you don't want them to know. How about a different approach where you kind of talk about the guy behind the curtain? You don't want to know anything about it, you don't want to see it, you don't want to be near it. I think that would be a much better approach. As the son of somebody who died of a drug overdose, this is something I have pondered my entire life. My father passed away when I was 9 years old to his drug and alcohol addiction, and we as a society have just failed a generation. I mentioned in 2000 when I ran for county sheriff that we had a serious heroin problem, and that was in 2000. It's just absolutely out of control now. And no, marijuana isn't part of the problem with heroin. Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, thank you. Mrs. Trishelli, thank you. And this concludes our school committee candidates forum. I thank all of you very much for participating and wish you the best of luck in the town election. For our viewers, we ask that you participate by voting in the election on May 14th. We hope that you'll have enjoyed this informative candidate forum. For additional replay times, please visit the PACTV website at pactv.org. On behalf of the Old Colony Memorial, Wicked Local Plymouth, and PACTV, thank you all for joining us.